Hey guys, welcome to JReviews. I'm Iceman and the game covered today is Shadowrun for the Super Nintendo. Shadowrun was developed and released in 1993 by the Australian company Beam Software. The game is best described as a Western RPG, which is extremely rare on the Super Nintendo. The game originated as a pen and paper series developed by Facer Corporation, and is well and truly a cyberpunk game with its setting, existence of mega corporations, mercenaries for hire being commonplace, and so much more. In addition to the cyberpunk, there is a strong fantasy element, with many races normally found only in medieval fantasy games, such as orcs, elves, ogres, etc., being commonplace here. This really gives the universe a unique feel all of its own, and it's for that reason that I absolutely love the Shadowrun series. The story to the game has you playing as Jake Armitage, a Shadowrunner with important data gunned down in the street. Soon after, you are resurrected by a mysterious half-dog, half-human woman. You then awaken in a morgue, then set forth to discover who you are, why you were killed, and to seek revenge on those responsible. The feel of this game is heavily cyberpunk, much in the same way as Satellite Rain. From the music to the setting, the hacking, all of it, though there is also the fantasy side with the fantasy races and enemies that you encounter. Graphics for the game are pretty standard for the Super Nintendo, though there is very little in the way of Mode 7 style effects. There is some in the starting intro where you get to see the view fly down the face of a building to reveal the Shadowrun logo, which is pretty awesome when that happens. Beyond that, the graphical style is isometric, except in the hacking sequences where the view changes to top-down view. The music in this game is absolutely fantastic. It has a very unique, original feel to it, which at the time was completely new. This style influenced the music in many later cyberpunk games like Satellite Rain, which I already mentioned, and quasi-sequel Shadowrun Returns, which I'll go more into later. The gameplay of Shadowrun is a mix of action RPG and adventure. During combat sections you stand stationary and must move your targeting cursor over to the enemy you want to target, then push the button to shoot or cast a spell. The adventure side comes into play when you pick up and use items, and when you engage in dialogue. In the dialogue screens, you unlock conversation topics as you talk to the various NPCs in the game, which unlock further conversation topics, and also this allows you to progress in the game. That is not to say that talking is the only part through the game, as this game is combat heavy, with combat being one of the primary things you'll be doing. To that end, you start off with a basic Beretta pistol and can improve your weaponry and armor as the game progresses. You have the option throughout the game to hire fellow Shadowrunners to assist you. Each has their own quirks and are good for specific things. One may be good at hacking, others spellcasting, and others in shooting. You have the further option to give better armor and weapons to them, which further improves their usefulness. Due to the high cost of hiring them, I would definitely recommend doing this, as if they happen to die during a battle, then you will need to go back and rehire them from where you found them. Speaking of rehiring, after a certain amount of time passes, they will leave you, and you will need to rehire them either way. The time that they stay with you can be improved by improving specific skills. The fact that they do leave after an amount of time is one of my main annoyances in the game. Speaking of skills, just as in most Western RPGs, you gain points through battle called Karma, which you can use to improve your various skills. There is quite the amount of skills to choose from shooting to hacking, health, spells, etc. etc. The knock-on effect of this, though, is that farming Karma is essential. You will not get anywhere in this game unless you spend some time farming. Leveling up your skills is the only way you will succeed, though you do not have to max out everything to get through the whole game. Hacking is another key area of the game which you will spend some time in. As you proceed through the game, you will come across computers which, when interacted with by your cyberdeck, or a Merc cyberdeck, allow you into the Matrix. No, not that Matrix. This game existed long before that movie came out. The Matrix sections of the game are very similar in nature to the Windows game Minesweeper, except that you move your character around towards cells, which may or may not have ice defenses. If you walk into these, you take damage. So just like Minesweeper, there is that gamble of whether or not to move in onto a cell or to attempt to attack it, which if it is blank, as in has no defenses, then it will cost you a small amount of health. The key goal of these sections is to either hack into a terminal or destroy a core to allow for use of an elevator. These sections often reward large amounts of money, so are always worth doing. Speaking of money, it is very hard to come by in this game. The only places you get any substantial amounts of it is via hacking, fighting in the arena, which you unlock midway through the game, or farming. Enemies are somewhat varied in the game, though some types you will be seeing throughout. The areas in the game vary a lot. Starting out, you go through old city areas and a garbage tip, sewers, corporate buildings, and more. The game is great in this regard. Length of the game is quite good as well. A playthrough generally goes for approximately 15 to 20 hours, though that will vary depending on your playstyle. Speaking of playstyles, this game really can change based on how you choose to play it. If you farm karma to the extreme, then you can be a jack of all trades solo killing machine. Or you could just play it in the style of the pen and paper game series, using Shadowrunners to assist you. I personally like to use the starting weapon, which is the Beretta pistol, throughout, and that forces me to use Shadowrunners for all the key sections and provides a much higher challenge level. The last bit I'll mention is that the gameplay of Shadowrun on the Super Nintendo does not 100% adhere to that of the pen and paper game for which it is based on, as it goes for more of an action RPG adventure game style. If you're looking for a more stricter interpretation, then the Genesis game of the same name would be more to your liking. Personally, I have played that game but found it to be inferior in terms of story and gameplay. However, its hacking sections are far superior, and you can take on shadowrunning merc jobs for extra cash and karma, which was good. So it all comes down to what you're looking for in a game. Like me personally, I go for more of the story, because this has a very noir kind of style to it as well. This is because there's a detective element, so I like that, and the music, the gameplay, the variety, whereas the Genesis game goes more for a stricter type appeal. So go with the one that suits you best. Overall, I absolutely love Shadowrun. This game was my first ever experience with Cyberpunk, and which led to a love that has continued on ever since. From its music, to the mix of adventure, its length, fantasy elements, and everything else. This to me is the best game on the Super Nintendo by far. Your opinion may be different, and that's fine. But this is mine. Out of all the games on the Super Nintendo, I've replayed Shadowrun more than any other, full stop. And for that reason, it is my absolute favouriteest game on the system. With that in mind, for a final rating, I'd give Shadowrun a 10 out of 10, which is the highest rating I've given to a game on this review series so far. One last thing to add is that the ending of this game alluded to a sequel game which never eventuated. That is, until one of the original creators of the pen and paper game series by the name of Jordan Wiseman set up a Kickstarter for a quasi-sequel to the Super Nintendo game. Now I say quasi, as it is more of a self-contained story with Jake Armitage, the character from the Super Nintendo game, only being a side character, and then there's only scant details given on what happened after the Super Nintendo game ended. It is extremely different in gameplay to the Super Nintendo game, with the combat being turn-based, with you in control of several characters at once, and as such is very reminiscent of the XCOM games in that regard. It's definitely a game to check out though if you really enjoyed the Super Nintendo Shadowrun game, even with the differences in gameplay, and you get to hear some nice remixes of some of the old Super Nintendo tracks. So it's definitely worth checking out. There's also some expansions that were done for that as well, which further improve on the experience. There was Dragonfall, which came out I think 1 or 2 years after, and then there was the last one, which was Hong Kong, which was my personal favourite, and that really nails it. That was great. But it has absolutely nothing to do with the Super Nintendo game, but it is great in its own regard. In either case, if you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more videos in the series, be sure to hit that subscribe button. and also just check out my channel for further videos, and you'll also find out what else is available. Alright guys, have a good one.